We're all learning. We're live. It only took us 11 minutes to figure this out. Hello, world.
Hello, world.
Welcome.
Hello.
Okay. I will kick us off by introducing myself and why we're here. My name is Jordan Bonds, and I'm Director of Product Strategy at thoughtbot. For anyone not familiar with thoughtbot, we are a product design and development consultancy that helps other companies make their digital products a success. Typically, honestly, we've worked on a few non-digital things. Let's be real. Any kind of product, come at us. One of the many ways that we do this is through our Incubator program. It's an 8-week program where we work with founders to help validate their market opportunity, learn as much as we can from their customers or potential customers, and turn that into a product strategy and a plan. If you would like more information on that, go to thoughtbot.com/incubator, which I have put here under my name. Sorry, like, how do I motion to which side of the screen? Okay. We just wrapped up week 7 of the 8-week program. So Danielle's going to have, she's old hat at this, knows everything there is to know, more or less. Today, we are joined by her, Danyelle Gray, who is co-founder of Womanish. And we're joined by Fatima Burke, who is a designer at thoughtbot and working on the Incubator team this time. While we're talking, if anybody has questions or comments, please jump in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. Okay. Introduce yourselves, folks. Who are you? Where are you? What do you do? I'm in Boston, by the way. Go ahead.
Hey guys, my name's Danyelle. I'm one of the co-founders of Womanish. I'm based in Chicago. And yeah, so it's been a really good experience so far. Womanish is an immersive experience and community created to celebrate women. Our tagline is all are welcome, but women are celebrated. And we're super excited, to be, I can't believe we're on week 7. Like, I'm like, where is the time going? It's just flying. But yeah, so that's a little bit about me.
Cool. And I'm Fatima Burke. I'm a designer at thoughtbot based in the Philly area, like right outside of Philly. And this is my first time on our incubator. So this has been an amazing experience for me. And yeah, 7 weeks has gone by so quickly and it's been delightful.
Awesome. Danyelle, I'm gonna put you in the hot seat. I think it's been a couple weeks since we did a live stream. What's been something surprising or has stood out to you that we've learned in the last couple of weeks?
I think that our unique value prop is something different than I would have initially thought. But I've been liking the direction that we've been going. Just getting a lot of insight from the users about their experiences about fostering connection and community has been really interesting. I think we've kind of nailed a little bit of a persona, which has been nice. A lot of similar characteristics around the type of person that we're, creating this for, which has been great. And just something interesting too with the prototype that I think that's been interesting is that people's perception or feeling around rejection and like caring about not necessarily maybe them being rejected, it's them as well, but also like how other people perceive things. And I think that it's nice to know people are caring, I guess, and thoughtful of like other people and like thinking about stuff like that. So I think that was like a new thing that I never really thought of because I've tried apps. And I think for me, I'm not really too caring about rejection. I'm like, whatever, like I'll move forward. But, it's just interesting hearing people's different perspectives and how they perceive like swiping and, the possibility of rejection and stuff like that. So I think that's been one of the interesting learnings that I've came across.
I'm curious to hear how you found the process of doing customer discovery and interviewing in this program. Like, how has that differed from how you all did that work prior, if at all?
Yeah, I think it differed. I think for me, it differed a lot because I think for our customer discovery, it was really more just like digital marketing. So we really didn't like, we did a lot of like smaller in-person events and got feedback that way, but we really didn't like, to be honest, when we launched our experience and community, we, you know, we had the smaller events and got a little bit of feedback, but it wasn't like detailed about like, how would you perceive this? We kind of were like, this is what we wanted. Great. Let's see how it, you know, see how it goes. And like, luckily it was well perceived, but I think it's been nice getting more detailed feedback about, you know, in steps of the way and understanding people's pain points. And it feels more validating because when we created, you know, Womanish Round community, it was something that like my sister and I, we felt that we were missing and we wanted a space. And we just assumed, right? It was an assumption. Luckily, our assumption was correct, and we were able to have, you know, hundreds of thousands of people come through our experience. But I think it's nice being able to really feel secure in the process of like actually taking time to validate the ideas and like getting out your assumptions. I think it's the right way to go in the future instead of just like doing stuff and like wishing for the best, because it can be costly, obviously, if it doesn't, you know, go the way you intend. But I think that actually taking the time to like making sure you're validating your idea before you build something, which I think a lot of founders fall into the trap of like, you know, you want it and you're like, well, I'm going to build it anyway. And then you could be thousands of $10,000 later. And it's like, wait, no one actually wanted this, like, but me, you know? So I think this process is definitely one that like I'm keeping in my, like, it's like ingrained in me for in the future about like, let me just test this first just to be sure. So it's been a good process.
Awesome. Fatima, do you have thoughts about that? How has you've done user interviewing on lots of projects before. How has doing that kind of research on the incubator differed, if at all?
I think, I'm not sure I mean, I think the most surprising thing about, and I'm not even sure if it's actually surprising, but just navigating the wave of the feedback that you're getting. And like, say you're exploring trends with interviewing and you know, you get these outliers, and just navigating that wave and kind of how that hits you with finesse. Like, you have to navigate that with finesse and how you respond when you get the feedback and how much of an impact that makes. You know, one of the things that we, you know, have to do throughout this process is just really like be flexible, and iterate on, maybe, you know, iterating on the script, and in our case, iterating on the prototype. But when you, and just, I think what's surprising to me is navigating how much impact like one individual that's an outlier like will have on, you know, like the questions that it raises and the changes that you're like, wait a minute, are we doing the right thing? And I think navigating that with finesse has been, you know, quite a ride. But yeah, it's really cool though.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up, because it is one of those things, like, you're trying to kind of bring a little bit of science to this process, but there's it's, you know, we don't talk, it's not a rigorous process like, you know, a hard scientific process would be. And so you're kind of balancing that with the team's building sense of alignment and consensus around what we're hearing, right? So you're right, like, there's, you know, we're all sharing with each other. We each go off and have interviews, and we come back and share what we heard and what we learned. And with every one of those reports, it's like, here are the things that sounded familiar that we've heard before. Cool. Here's some other stuff that came up. Not really sure like where to put this. And it's always a fruitful conversation. Like, okay, why, you know, how different is this? Why do we think it's different? Is this a different persona? This person's a different persona than we've been focused on before. And the goal there is to drive sort of a shared understanding of the market. There's no wrong or right here. It's just making sure the team is moving together. What tends to happen if you don't do that sharing and talking through all the things that come up in interviewing is, like, you know, each person will just sort of take and run with the insights they get from their interviews alone. But yeah, the outliers always give you a moment of like, because, you know, it's like someone, you know, everyone we've talked to, as an example, is like, oh yeah, I get all my information from, you know, I don't know, Reddit or something. And then one person comes along and is like, I only read the New York Times. And you're like, Okay, is that what? And it's, you have to figure out how often do you sort of take that to heart, and how often are you like, okay, that says this person's an outlier and maybe not our target person. Cool. Okay, I'm kind of doing these questions out of order, but it's fine. You all are rolling with me admirably. Fatima, let's stay with you for a second. We rolled into a product design sprint, little compressed, very snappy product design sprint. How was that experience for you, and how did it differ from other design sprints you've done at thoughtbot?
I would say, I mean, first of all, it was great. I think we got so many great ideas that came out of it, and we were challenged in a lot of ways. But for me, I'm just used to, like you mentioned, it was condensed to 3 days. I'm used to a full week sprint, so pulling out the right exercises to get the right, to extract what's the most important and to give us the most bang for our buck was definitely very important to do that in 3 days. So that is one thing that differed from, how I've been a part of sprints before. Another thing that was a little different was I think the order in which, things were done. Typically, and you would do a critical path, say before a brainstorming exercise, but, I think doing things the conventional way, is okay, I think, but based off of the way that we were, like maybe some of the biases that we came in with, or some of the ideas that we came in with, I felt like giving us the opportunity to do brainstorming before nailing down a path that I felt would like lock us in and maybe not give us the freedom that we were looking, to like that kind of ingenuity and innovation, that environment for that. I feel like, doing just bending the rule and swapping the order of exercises in an unconventional way was really cool. So that way we didn't have to get locked into, like, say, building this kind of platform versus that kind of platform, or this kind of opportunity versus that one. So I really appreciated the flexibility of the team, and not coming in with these rigid expectations so that we can get innovation out of it. So that was really, really cool. And like with any design sprint, you're already coming in with the challenge of like keeping your eyes open for opportunities. And then the challenge of doing things remotely or sprint remotely. So definitely condensing it down to 3 days was an interesting thing to do that I hadn't experienced before.
Yeah, there's sort of pluses and minuses I find with the remote thing of doing some of the exercises asynchronously versus synchronously. It's like you gain some things and you lose some things. And I as a person who does my best thinking, I think when I'm like not in a group call, appreciated having a little bit of space to sort of like think through my own ideas. Danyelle, how did you find the experience? Had you ever been through a product design sprint before? Was this your first one?
Yeah, this is my first one. Because I'm non-technical, so I think too, when we've done, like when we were working on an app in the past, we like outsourced from like Upwork, and it was just like not. It would have been nice if that's what they did with us, right? Like when we created it, but like that was a whole nother beast when you outsource, trying to do things like cheaply, and it just like, yeah, that's a whole nother process. So I really appreciated like this. People like really experts in knowing what they're doing and like how to do it in the future, because it's definitely something I'm gonna like apply in the future. So it was really helpful to just and even like the thought of, I never even like thought about just like walking through a prototype as screens before you even like build anything. Like I'm like, what a effective way to do things. My thought, is like, oh, we have to build something, and then but it's like literally you could literally make screens and you can adjust, and then you get to. I'm like, wow, that is just like, whoo, mind blowing right there.
Yeah.
So I really like appreciated everything that I've like learned so far about like especially being like non-technical about the process. So it's been definitely eye-opening for me.
Awesome. One of the fun moments for me was the first group call we were having after Fatima had made like a full first pass at a set of screens.
Mhm.
And it really highlighted a dynamic that I often talk to founders about, but it's hard to sort of talk about in the abstract. And it was really on full display in that conversation, which was, once you have a thing that you made that you're looking at, you get very attached to it and you start thinking it's real, even if you are the people who are making it, and like you literally know it's not real. In that conversation, we all started to drill down so far into like, well, what do we think the words on this button should be, and what do we think the confirmation screen should be? And I kept being like, hey, not important at this time. And even I was even getting sucked into it. I think I was the first person to off-road into like a conversation that just didn't really matter. And we all kept having to remind each other that the purpose of this prototype is not to design the thing we want to build. It's to test things with our users, test concepts with them. And that's a very different reason to design something. And it's, you know, it's a completely different way of thinking about design. And we have to keep reminding ourselves, even though like we knew that. I'm curious how the two of you kind of felt about that dynamic.
Yeah, I think it was helpful for you to reel us back in, because I definitely think we would get in the weeds and we're like, wait, okay, like actually, like that's not important right now. So I think that was nice to have someone who's like been through this, because I think if like no one had been through it, we would have been so in the weeds to like have no one like reel us back out. It would have just been like kind of a mess. So I think it was but yeah, like I got attached to like the screen and like the button, even like the word buddy that we, you know, one conversation we're like stuck on like that thing. And it's just like, you're right, like it's not really that important, but like how they're interacting with like the overall like screens and things like that is like more important than like focusing on like a word or whatever. So
yeah, I mean, as a designer, I mean, like designing a prototype at this stage is meant to be like low fidelity, like, you know, just giving up the concept and not necessarily, you know, the in-between screens and the notification and the error states and all of the things. I think that always poses a, you know, particular challenge for a designer who once you start seeing things come alive, like a concept and things that we've been talking about for weeks, it begins to come alive and you're like, well, let's make it more alive. Like, you know,
yeah.
so it was definitely fun. But then, you know, you have to point back to what are we trying to learn, and just making sure that the prototype answers the questions that we want to ask. I don't know if that makes sense, but that it addresses, you know, the way in which we want to pull feedback when we test it. So that was really cool.
But like, imagine, like, this is just a prototype, right? That we all know is just like so easy you can copy a screen, change the text in Figma. It's like no big deal. But imagine how attached you're going to feel to the thing that you actually built that has users in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It becomes even harder to experiment then, because you will feel extremely precious about that thing. And every time you go to ship something, there's this feeling in your heart, like, what if I'm going to alienate the users? And what if people don't click on this? So it's so much better to do that kind of experimenting now but like you said, Fatima, like we're already so attached to it. It's really, so I'm asking about this stuff because it's there's a kind of balance of dynamic here where in some ways you can't have a very productive conversation about what it is you're building until there's something to look at.
Mm-hmm.
But the risk there is that once you have something to look at, you get very attached to it. So this is why I like try to keep us from doing that for as long as I possibly can. But I also know that that has its own risks, because we're often talking about things and imagining things that are very different, and we can't get at what's in our own brains until we get something out like on paper to look at. So, you know, it's iterative, it's risky and fraught, but I think moving quickly is the only antidote, right? Cool. Okay, so then we got through this prototype and then we started showing it to people. Has there been anything particularly surprising about those walkthroughs that either of you has heard, or just maybe from presenting it, something you've noticed in yourself or something you've heard from users?
I think for me, building when you're doing a prototype, you don't include all the screens, and it's always insightful to see how people kind of represent the in-betweens, like how they pull out what should happen. You can draw as many insights from what you put in the prototype as to what you keep out of the prototype. And you get to hear what people assume, how things are going to work or what they desire without having to be like so directed or so obvious about it. And that's one thing I really appreciate.
Yeah, I think that it's just nice to get people overall like vibe about it. I luckily haven't had any ones where, for the most part, all the ones that I've had, they've said at the end that they would be interested in it, added this feature and things. And a lot of the stuff that they said makes sense. So I think it was helpful to not having the features on there and hearing what would get them to pay the price point was helpful. And a lot of this stuff was like, it made sense to me. I'm like, okay, yeah, that makes sense for me to include and things like that. So just gaining stuff that you may not have thought of, and you get to literally hear like from your potential customers about like what they would make them pay for it. But luckily I've had most interviews that have been pretty positive. So that's given me some good hope. But yeah, I think there's obviously just like stuff that, when we get a feedback, like one that we got the other day where it wasn't necessarily as, positive as we like, but then Jordan, you had made a comment about like, well, knowing that they aren't our target, like maybe they're not our, target user. And that's actually a good thing, because like you're identify your product enough where like who would be a good fit and who would not be a good fit. So I think that like, yeah, it's just like all a learning process, but it's been good.
Yeah, it's there was a moment in the interview I was in yesterday where kind of what you were saying, Fatima, there was a sort of like a, every moment you're like, what do you think is going to happen when you click that button? Or, what did you, and then they click it and you say, what did you expect to happen? And the person that we were interviewing, Deanna and I were interviewing someone, was like, well, here's what I imagine would happen. And I could tell Deanna and I were both like, oh, that's a really good idea that we have not thought about. Like it had not come up. I'm not going to give away the secret in this call, but like it was that, invariably you start doing testing and like users come up with really cool ideas that like you just weren't thinking about. And that was one of those moments where I was like, oh, duh, good idea, user. But she like had no idea that we were just dummies over there. It was like a very funny moment. Yeah, it's like just always remarkable to me, sort of just the more brains you can throw at a thing, mm-hmm. the better it's going to be when you finally go to build it. In that regard, I think we're like very far along. We've already iterated a bunch, right, from the mm-hmm. conversations. And that's like another thing that I say to you all the time, but I think it's like a thing you kind of have to constantly keep in mind, which is like, we went to show people the prototype the first time. And I was like, now this is going to be wrong. All of it's going to be wrong. Let's get our heads around it right now. It's okay. That doesn't mean we failed. It means we learned something. And it means it's like a real validation of the process that we didn't spend 18 months building something that was going to be wrong.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Okay. So we've learned a bunch, just overall, but specifically from the prototype and from interviewing folks. And we are now rounding the corner on turning that into a plan, tying it into the business. How are you all feeling about going into that work?
I'm feeling good about it. I think that I liked our last conversation where we talked about the opportunity for like our community, but the opportunity as selling it to other businesses and things like that, just to think about the scalability of it, which was one of our me and Deanna's biggest things. Just because our location was brick and mortar, and how do we, turn this into a software that we can leverage our community more? And also, how does this turn into like $100 million business, like beyond the brick and mortar location? So I think that I'm really liking the idea that we have came up with. And it's also really interesting enough because I go to a lot of conferences and events for work. And like one of my main things I think about is like these conferences are 20,000, 30,000 plus, but there's not a lot of connectivity. And I'm thinking about like all the places I go to that like these people would love this, you know? So it's just like really interesting how it like ties into like what I do corporately and then also like my entrepreneur business. And so it all just like, it seems like it seamlessly like blends. So yeah, yeah. So I was talking to Deanna about that the other day and I was like, yesterday, and I was like, yeah, it's really funny because I do like literally go to these all the time. And I know one of the biggest things when I talk to people is like, I wish I knew other people coming in, you know, all this other stuff. And I'm like, there's just a lot of opportunities. So I'm excited that we landed on this. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I'm just excited about seeing how we can pull all of the things together into the presentation with the numbers and the research that we've done and the research that exists outside of the research that we've done. I'm really excited to see like that final package of what we're presenting. So it's gonna be
yeah, I also feel like I'm interested to see how, like, not that it's like there's so much going on. I'm just like, how do we put like a pretty bow on it? You know, at the end of it, and like, how do we take everything we've learned and like, yeah. So I'm interested to see how that works.
Yeah. So we have this framework doc that we use in the incubator called the Opportunity Framework, and it's sort of like a worksheet or something that you fill in gradually as you're doing things. And from that, it's all the detail, right? It's exactly what we're talking about right now. It's like with numbers and evidence and et cetera. But then the challenge from there is to turn that into a narrative that that you can sell people on, both customers and partners and investors, without getting lost in the weeds. And so that's sort of the next challenge. Like, what is the actual narrative? But I think even there, we have already, once you hit on that piece of value that just feel like that, given everything you've learned, really feels right. And then, like you say, Danyelle, you start to see it in your own life everywhere, which I have had the same experience this week, where I went to a networking event last night and I was like, man, this really would have been useful.
Love that for us.
I know, right? It's great. Totally unrelated. Like, this was obviously not a Womanish event, and like, I was like, it would have been really useful. So like, you start that narrative kind of becomes easier. That story becomes easier and easier to tell because it's so clear what it is. But like, you wouldn't have been able to tell that story 8 weeks ago, you know, with that kind of clarity and succinctness, much less with the data. So like the challenge for us in front of us now is to gather everything together so we all understand what it is, create this simpler narrative out of it, but then make it very easy for you all to tell both that simple narrative and to bring the receipts, right? Because there are going to be people who hear that narrative and are like, you sure about that? And they're going to ask you questions, but you know the answers, right? It's not, and now you have like a place to go to point to. So yeah, it's exciting to be kind of just one more week of work, no problem. It'll all come together just fine.
Yeah, it's like, let's up the hour meetings to an hour and a half, and let's try to get it all done. So yeah, I'm excited. But I feel like our meetings go, honestly, like sometimes go that long anyway. So like,
yeah, they do. And this is another one of those tough things about the early work, is that so much of it is about establishing and maintaining alignment across the team, and that can feel really time consuming and fiddly. There's like, people come along at different speeds, right? So there might be something that I'm thinking about that I feel like, okay, we've put a bow on that. And then someone else is like, I don't really understand this, you know. We're all kind of moving at different speeds, but that is such great practice, because that's all you all are going to be doing from now on, is evangelizing about this thing. And people are going to understand different parts of it at different times, and you're going to have to be able to speak to each of them, each of the points sort of lucidly and over again. I think someone recently sort of referred to themselves in their role as a CEO as like the repeater in chief or something. It's like you're the person who's just like constantly like, here's what we're doing. Here's what we're doing. Here's what we're doing. And you have to like really be patient and be psyched to talk about it. Something else I was going to say earlier, I don't remember now. Also though, you know, we're here, you know, we're with you for this journey now for as long as you'll have us. So yes, next week is the last week, but we'll we won't be strangers after that. So it's very exciting to think about what you all are going to do, where you're going to take this after this.
Mm-hmm.
Super excited about it. But this is not our last live stream. To that point, we will do another one at the week after the incubator ends. So I think I will wrap it up here, unless you two have any other things you wanted. Did anyone in the audience have any questions for us? It says we have 7 viewers right now. These people are not asking us questions or commenting. We're happy to hear from you. I'll just kind of tread water here for a few seconds. Okay. So again, the URL for the incubator program is thoughtbot.com/incubator. If you're curious about the programming, if you want to get updates about the application window, please sign up. They will be opening again soon, the applications. And we're going to have another live stream in a couple weeks. Oh, right. So glad I made notes. This is why notes are good. We're also going to be adding a workshop series in between incubator sessions. So we're doing this one now. And then April, May, we are going to be doing a workshop series about the content of the incubator. So obviously this will not be thoughtbot giving you a product team to work with you. It's not nearly as intensive and concentrated as what Womanish is experiencing right now, but could be very useful if you're thinking about starting something new. I don't have a link to give you about that yet, but if you are curious about it, it's going to be 8 sessions, 8 90-minute sessions over 8 weeks. Very small group, so you should be able to, it's going to be a workshop setting, so you should be able to bring the situation you're in with your business or your idea and really talk to folks about it, get some help with your thinking, as well as sort of walking through the content of the incubator. So if that's interesting to you, definitely reach out to me on LinkedIn, or my email address is just jordan@thoughtbot.com. Wish I had a link. We're not quite, but the link will happen next week. But so that's coming up. And also, of course, more of these Mac. Like, what are some other ones? You all know these? What does this one? Will this one work? Yeah, that one's good. We got this one, which I love. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, they always pop up at inopportune times. And so the programming of the incubator is also the playbook we run is public. We are gradually publishing chapters for that. And we just dropped a new one this week about the strategic planning phase, which is exactly, where we left off talking here. This is like the sort of final thing that we do with folks in the incubator. That is at thoughtbot.com/playbook. You can just scroll down to customer discovery and find all the content there. We have one more chapter to do after that, which is what we will be talking about with Womanish in a couple of weeks. So stay tuned. Yeah, I don't know. That's it. Thank you both so much. This was fun.
Thank you, guys.
This was
Bye.
amazing. Thank you.
Have a good one, everybody.